Hello there, and welcome to another episode of the Salt Mines X-Wing podcast. That's right, a podcast dedicated to the backbone of the X-Wing community, people just like you doing what they can to get better at the game. I'm Sailor Joe, and in today's episode, we're going to talk about the return to in-person etiquette. But before we do that, a couple of notes that I'd just like to cover. First and foremost, a special thanks to Perfectly Broken, Ave66, Jacob.marmoset.s, Tar, Steelwater6942, Raviolo, Fish Sticks, Jesdick, Joannis Mumady, Awar, Sai Caneto, Terry's, Catherine Nisera, Trigger Happy Taco, BurningStick.exe, and Math. Thank you for supporting my research. And as you know, I am currently hosting a Patreon giveaway. So once we get to 5 patrons, I'll be giving away a small ship. Do a random drawing. Bottom tier gets you 1 entry. Top tier gets you 3 entries. If we get up to 10, then I'll move that up to a large ship. And if we get 15 or more, I will move that to a squadron pack. So, again, if you're interested in doing that, please check that out. Also, special thanks to the current patrons to the podcast. I'm having trouble pulling up my list. Oh, here we go. So, special thanks to the patrons Swallowmere, OP1 Kenobi, and Owen Washington Hobbs. I appreciate you all supporting the podcast, and we're actually going to be doing some cool stuff with Patreon here in the near future. Once I transfer to my next command and have a little bit more time on shore, I will be going over and revamping this. So all the early patrons will get a special one-off production of a token that I'm going to create. So if that's not incentive to get in and become a patron earlier, I don't know what is. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. Let me pull up my show notes. Here we go. The first thing to remember about return to in-person etiquette is, as always, to be a good sportsman. Man, I'm just all over the place. Hold on. We're going to put a pin in that, come right back to it. So some of y'all might asking, I know it's not Thursday, so my TAD time is coming away, so my temporary assigned duty. So I'm actually going to be traveling on the day that I would normally record. So I wanted to, instead of leaving y'all without an episode this week, I wanted to go ahead and record it early and get it out there. So with that out, hopefully there's no more questions. Let's go ahead and get into it. So being a good sportsman. Remember, there are 6 aspects to being a good sportsman that we've talked about kind of ad nauseum on this show. I'm going to cover them just one more time so everyone's on the same page. And the first one is enjoy the game for the game's sake. If you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. The next one is be ethical. Now, everyone has their own line of what ethics they are willing to, how should we say, let slide. But overall, the whole point of the be ethical is to present the best game possible to your opponent. Right? That's it. So that means following the rules, giving them opportunities, what you would expect. Be the type of opponent you want to play against. I can't think of any better way to put it than that. All right, next one is respect yourself. That means even when you do badly, tell that mean person inside your head to go away. Seriously, tell them to go away. It's a training technique. I've heard it now several times. But when you are beating yourself up, if you let your coach talk to you the way that you were talking to you, would you still employ that coach? Probably not. All right. Respect others. If you are not going to respect yourself and you are not going to respect your others, you're going to be a pretty poor opponent to play against. And that goes against being the best type of player or being the player that you want to play against. So don't do it. Respect your opponents. All right. Next one is accept victory and or defeat. Don't gloat about it, but don't pout about it either. It's a game. Remember, we're playing to have fun. And the last one is support your community. All right. I think those are all important, especially as we return to in-person play. Let's talk about one big thing that's on everyone's mind when it comes to in-person play. That's right, vaccinations. First and foremost, let me just say, this is a podcast. It's a podcast about a game where we push plastic spaceships around a giant mouse pad. I'm not here to get political on you. So, whether you decide to get vaccinated or not, hey, that's you. Whatever you do, I hope you made that decision by looking at all the data and being informed, right? And that's how I'm going to treat you. Like you're an adult who made a decision. Now, let's say you decide to get the vaccination. Cool. Have fun. But, importantly, also tend to your basic hygiene. No one likes playing against smelly person. And there's usually always one in a game group. If you can't figure out who it is, ask yourself when the last time you took care of your basic hygiene. But, here's the thing. You're vaccinated. Good job. Don't use it as a license to play when you have the flu or sick or whatever else is going on. It's not a license for that. The vaccination has a very specific purpose, and I expect that you know what that purpose is and plan accordingly. So don't be the person that spreads sickness because you have to get a game in. We've just proven that we can go a long time without in-person play. So don't change that. All right. But let's say you decide not to get vaccinated. All right? Does that mean that you can't play in person? I don't know. That really depends on a couple of things. It depends on your local group. It depends on your FLGS more than anything else. Your TO has a little bit of say, but really the store that you play at has the most say on who they want to let into their store to play games and what precautions they're going to have for those players. For me personally, if you choose not to get vaccinated, I'm going to treat you like you made an informed decision. And as long as you're taking your appropriate precautions, I'm cool to get in a game with you. I'm going to, do my appropriate precautions, even though, and I'll tell you, I am fully vaccinated. I'm not going to get into the reason why I decided to do that, but just know that I am. And go with that. We can play a game. That's a risk that I'm willing to take, but not everyone's willing to take that risk. So as a non-vaccinated person, don't get mad if someone who's vaccinated doesn't want to play against you. It's their choice. On the same token, if you're vaccinated, don't guilt trip the unvaccinated people. Pretend they are the adults and have made a decision. And this is important, leave it be. Right? Let them rest with their decision. Don't guilt trip them either way. If they want to get the vaccine, cool. If they're, already had one and they're waiting on another, cool. If they don't want to get it and they have their reasons for it, leave it be. You don't have to play that person. I know, that's a concept, but you really don't. And don't insist that everyone else shouldn't just because you don't want to play them. Most of the people who play this game are adults. Let them make their own decisions. And live with it. All right. Next. Let's not forget the phases. Now, this seems a little weird to talk about the phases when we're talking about the return to in-person play, but here's the important part, and I think a lot of us forget. Even in TTS, we just tend to get this kind of tunnel vision towards what we're doing, and it becomes really easy to just fly through the certain phases. So what are they? Well, let me just do a quick recap. So we've got the planning phase, we've got the system phase, we've got the activation phase, the engagement phase, and the end phase. All of which are incredibly important. Give time to each phase. And give your opponent time for each phase. Remember, this is part of being a good sportsman. We're not taking advantage of our opponent because they forgot X, Y, or Z. Don't be that guy. All right. Here's some other things to consider in no particular order. Is table state. Now, we know table state in TTS is really, really easy to deal with. Oh, you mess something up, hit the back button, everything's fine. Relink your dials. Okay, everything's good. Table state in-person play, I don't know if you remember, but it can be a little bit hectic, so pay attention to it. Which leads me to the next part, right? Bumping. It's gonna happen. Whether you accidentally knock over a ship, or you accidentally hit something, or tap something, or something like that, it's gonna happen. It's going to be part of in-person play. Don't forget about it. Right? If you mess up a ship placement, your opponent gets the final say on where it is. If you have a question, call the judge over. That's what they're there for. But, and this is going to be a thing, right? Everyone's going to bump. So please, when it happens, don't act like it's the last or it's the only time that's ever happened and it's the end of the world. Because it's not. Remember, big picture, we are a bunch of, I'm going to say nerds. If that offends you, I'm sorry. But we're a bunch of nerds playing a game with plastic spaceships, pushing them around on a giant plastic mouse pad. So, let's keep that perspective in mind as we're playing the game. All right, next, interacting with opponent ships. Now, this one's a little tricky. Before the pandemic, usually I would ask, hey, do you mind if I just move your ship real quick? And it would depend on who was on which side of the board the action was happening on. Sometimes I'd ask my opponent, hey, can you get that for me? Can you do it too hard for my ship? Can you do X, Y, and Z? These are all important things to keep in mind, right? The most important part of all this, especially when it comes to interacting with your opponent's pieces, is just ask. Excuse me. Got a frog in my throat there. Just ask. Hey, do you mind if I do this? Can you do that for me? And just feel out their comfort. If you ask the questions beforehand, before the game starts, it'll free up a lot of pain, for lack of a better word, in the middle of the game. All right? Now, let's talk about player proximity. Here's another thing, right? We're so used to social distancing, and we can see the restrictions on that starting to lift up, but we know that even though this game, we're sitting across from each other in a 3x3 foot mat, So we're about 4 to 6 feet away from each other. Sometimes we get closer. Again, feel out what's comfortable with your opponent. Maybe, I mean, it used to be if it was a close arc, me and my opponent, we'd both be sitting in and looking over it at the same time. Maybe if one or both of you isn't comfortable with that, you give each other space, right? It's, again, going back to that good sportsmanship, setting a good environment for your opponent and being the type of opponent you want to play against. All right, next one is time. This one I think is going to get people a lot more than they think it is. I think we are on average seeing more player turns in TTS than we would see in person play, and I think that's going to throw a few people off. Now, depending on the pace of play with you and your opponent, you might see more. It really depends on a whole lot of factors, but just be willing to be flexible with it. I guess that's probably what you could sum up my entire podcast here, is just be flexible. All right. Next, fatigue. Here's something. Physical fatigue is a thing. You will feel it. Leaning over a table, if you're not used to doing that, especially for us older folks, that's hard on your back. And if you're not ready for it, it could catch you off guard. So make sure you're taking care of yourself outside of the game. So that means doing good things like eating healthy, exercising, things like that. That even though we're playing and enjoying this game, those are just good health things that you should be doing anyway outside of the game. I say should, and you're like, well, you just said all this other stuff about, yeah, you're right. Okay, I say should because there's a lot of stuff to it. But if you choose not to do that stuff, again, you're an adult, you've made your decision, fine. I can accept it. Can you? All right, and the last thing that I want to talk about before two more things. Second to last thing is organization. I know as we're getting closer to in-person play, we're starting to see a lot of the organization posts coming up. I know I spent probably a good couple hours trying to organize all of my new ships and whatnot and get everything set up into a way that makes sense for me. Make sure you're taking time to do that. And really what that is it goes into that time factor. If you set up with what you want to do before you get to the table, you're going to be able to get more game done. It's just as simple as that. Maximize your time and efficiency by being organized. And if you're one of those people who has a hard time being organized, hey, I get it. I understand. But give it a try. And see if that helps you get more games in. I can tell you that when I show up, now I'm a huge nerd and probably spend way more time on this than I need. I have everything I need, all the tokens, all the cardboard, all the cards, all set aside in their own containers for a number of different lists. So all I have to do is get to the table, pull out a list, set it up, and I'm ready to go. I mean, that's what works for me. Find what works for you to maximize your time. All right. Now I'm on to the last topic that I wanted to cover. And that's FLGS or TO support. Seriously, reach out to both your local game store and, if the game store isn't running it, your local TO, to see what you can do to help bring the game back. Now, it could be as simple as pinging your group and assisting with league structure, but it goes a long way in keeping the game healthy. Now, I'm going to talk to this point a little bit more personally in that I'm a TO at my local game store at TC Rockets in San Diego. And because of my current deployment schedule, it could be a little while before I'm able to organize everything by myself to get league and events back to the store, even being vaccinated. So I need help with that kind of stuff. And if you want the game to survive, then, or not survive. Survive is too strong a word. If you want the game to continue to grow and return to the healthy state that it was, then you need to step up and help with that. Now, it probably not anything big, but you'll never know until you ask the question. All right. And finally, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this podcast. We're about where we want to be on time, so thank you for sticking with me so far. If you'd like to support the podcast, please consider leaving it a review on however you consume it. And if you really like it, please consider becoming a patron. You can find me at patreon.com/saltminesxwing. If you'd like to reach out and chat, you can tweet me at saltxwing or send me an email at saltminesxwing@gmail.com, or you can reach me on the Discord servers at SailorJoeV. And as you know, I like to end every podcast with a question. This week's question is, what are you going to do in preparation for in-person play? This is Sailor Joe, signing off.